Hi guys, welcome back to the new camera What's Next part 4. This time we're going to be covering lenses and everything they can do to improve your picture taking. I'm sure many of you know that the way you measure the size of a lens is through the focal length, which is in turn measured in millimeters. What does that mean? Well, basically it means how far from the sensor to the focal point of the lens is. It might not necessarily be the back element of the lens or the front element. It could be somewhere right in the middle. But how far away from the sensor to the focal point. So this lens here is a 55mm. So that means from the sensor plane to the point it focuses is 55mm. If we take the 50mm being the benchmark of all lenses, the 50mm is actually your point of view that your eye sees. It's the closest lens that gives the field of view to what your eye sees. So if we take a 35mm camera with a 50mm focal length, it's going to be the closest that your field of view that your eye can see. Anything higher than that number is going to bring it closer, and anything lower than that number is going to be further away, appear to be further away. Of course, the camera hasn't changed distance, it's just the field of view of what you're taking the picture of. Most lenses fall into one of three categories. They're either prime lenses. Prime lenses are a single focal length and usually faster, meaning they let more light in. You can see this absolutely huge 85mm from Canon is really fast, 1.2 this one. The best quality lens you can buy would be a prime lens, but the downside is it's just one focal length. You have to let your feet do the zooming. After prime lenses, you're going to have zoom lenses. Zoom lenses are going to be in a range from around 24 to 70 or 24 to 105. They're going to have a moderate range, not an amazing amount of range, but a moderate range. That way you can keep the quality really good. You've still got some flexibility and you can still have a relatively fast lens, a minimal zoom range. Lastly, you have super zooms. Normally in the realm of the consumer, they have really extensive ranges. You'll see on this one here, it's a 28 to 200. 28 to 200. The downside of having these really long ranges is that it makes the lenses particularly slow. This one is a f3.8 to a 5.6. So not only does it not hold its aperture when zoomed in and out, but it's also quite a slow aperture too. So it's going to need an awful lot of light to work in. Now these sorts of lenses are great if you've got perfect conditions, if you're outside, if you're at your kid's sporting event and it's bright sunshine, these are fine. But anything other than that, they're going to show their weaknesses, and normally they're not made particularly well. This one is very light and rattly, and you know, this one's made by Tamron, and there's nothing against Tamron. They make some high-end lenses too, yeah, the super zooms, be wary. There's a trade-off for having a lot of zoom length. How would we describe the different focal lengths of different lenses? Well, if you take 50mm, remember that's our base on a 35mm camera. 50mm lens is the closest to what your eye sees. So if we take that as the golden standard, if you go down from that, anything from that is going to be wider, and then anything above from that, as I said, is going to be much more brought in. So we start from the very low numbers. A super wide would be considered anything from an 8 to a 24mm, probably 8 to 20mm. They're going to be your full circular. Fisheye would be the 8mm, where it's a completely round image, through to fisheye with distorted goldfish bowl-like effects, to really high-end architectural type wide-angle lenses that can be as wide as 14mm. And 20mm is still considered a super wide. And then above that, then you've got your wide lenses, which are probably from 24 to about 40. 24 to 40 is considered wide. You're not going to get the same distortions that you get with the super wides, but wides are about 24mm to 40mm. And then normal lens. Now I've said the gold standard, and this is what everybody says, is the 50mm on a 35mm sensor is the gold standard. It is. It's actually closer to 43mm is what your eye actually sees. But everybody, it's one of those things where everybody just says it's 50mm for ease of use. So if you consider a normal lens anywhere from 40 to 55mm, I think that would be the normal range, 40 to 55. And then we move on to the telephoto range. Anywhere from about 70mm to 200mm would be considered telephoto. Then after that, you're moving into your super telephotos, which is basically 300 and above. Anything above 300 is considered a super telephoto. Check out all the pictures down below here, and I'll show you each different focal length so you can get a good idea. I started at a 16mm because that's all I had on me last night, and then went through all the different ranges up to 300mm. It'll give you a good idea of what each focal length does. So what have you got to look for when you're buying a lens? First thing you want to check out is the lens mount system itself. Each manufacturer will have their own system. This is the Sony E-mount. Then you've got a Micro Four Thirds. This is for a Panasonic. You can see physically they're very different in size. Then you've got the Canon E-mount, Hasselblad H system. So they're all different, and you need to know which system your camera is. And don't get too bogged down in this. You're going to learn what your mount is for your camera, and then that's the only one you need to worry about. But there is another thing that you need to know. You need to know what size your sensor is, because Sony actually make similar mounts but for different size sensors, as do Canon. I'm sure Nikon do too. So if you have a full frame camera, meaning 35mm, you'll see that all their lenses on here have, it's a Vario Tessar FE. The FE stands for full frame. So this will work with a full frame, and it will work with smaller sensors too. It can't be said the other way round though. So the smaller sensor lenses will not work with a full frame because it won't cast enough light over the entire sensor. So you need to know the mount type of your lens, and you also need for the sensor, you need to know the sensor size of the lens to know how to really decide on a lens that you want to buy. Also, you want to figure out, does it have image stabilization? Does it have, you can see on here we've got, this is one of Canon's image stabilization lenses. This is a 24 to 105. Now if you're doing video, or if you're working in low light and you want to handhold something and your camera doesn't have inbuilt stabilization, this is huge. I mean, it might, especially if you're doing movies, you know. So that might be an issue. The speed, the other thing would be the speed. The speed between a lens with an aperture like that, which is 1.2, and this one, which is f4, is huge. So are you looking to do a lot of low light stuff? You've got to ask yourself, are you looking to work primarily in low light, or do you want a bigger range of zoom where you one size fits all type thing? Ask yourself those questions. Also, you know, if you want to get a shallow depth of field, like we talked about in the aperture section of it, then the lower numbered aperture that you have, the more, or the shallower the depth of field, and the more bokeh you're going to get. So that's definitely something that you might be a consideration to you. You know, if you're doing a really nice available light portrait, you definitely want some sort of bokeh. You can get it with lenses like the 70-200. Like this, you can definitely get it, but it's definitely a lot easier with primes, and you know, can be cheaper too. And then, so also for autofocus, now not many lenses, or less and less lenses, come without autofocus now, but there are a few that are designed more for movie making, and the difference is that they have a silky smooth focus ring that you can turn, and it's really precise. And unlike this, you can see that it turns and turns and turns, When you're dealing with movie cameras, then theirs doesn't. It goes to fully open to fully closed and it stops. It's a very definitive stop, and that's used for pulling focus. If I want to change two distances in focus and make it repeatable every time I do it, then you would want a cine lens to do that, because you can literally mark where one part is in focus, then move it, it's called rack focusing, and then stop at the next point. Like if you've got two talking heads, you're looking over one person's shoulder, and you can zoom from one person to the next standing behind them, which would be a time when you would do that. Now, probably more specialty lenses, but if movie making is your thing, then you might want to consider a manual focus lens. The other thing you might want to consider is the brand. Now, the obvious choice would be to go for the brand of your camera, whether it's a Sony or a Nikon or a Canon or a Panasonic, and get those brands. Now, I will say 99% of the time, in my experience, the autofocus has worked better with the original manufacturer's branded lenses. I mean, that's just the way it is. But don't be put off by that. There can be some huge savings to be had if you buy the off brands like Sigma, Tamron, and there's plenty of others out there. I own this Sigma 35mm prime, and it's the Art Series lens, which is their high-end lens, and I'd put it against anything. It's absolutely amazing, really, really good, and you're not selling yourself short when you buy something like this. And actually, in the reviews, it actually did better than Canon's own version of it. They've since brought out another version because I don't think they were too pleased with it. Sigma was making a better lens than they were, but absolutely phenomenal lens. So look into their higher end lenses. I mean, if you're just out about saving money, then look at their lower end ones too. But their higher end lenses, like the Sigma Art Series, are definitely good lenses, and I wouldn't shy away from them. They're very, very good quality, good value for money. You'll save yourself some serious money if you want to go for those lenses. Another thing you want to look out for when you're buying lenses is the size of your sensor. The reason this is important is because when you're buying lenses, the numbers on the barrel might not represent what you're actually going to see. We said the golden standard for sensors was a 35, and we said the golden standard for lens would be a 50mm. Well, that is correct for a 35mm sensor, but this camera I'm shooting on now is a APS-C size sensor. It's from Sony, and it has a crop factor of 1.5. And if you look at this here, it's a super wide angle lens. It's a 10 through to an 18, okay? Now on that camera, it's still super wide. It wouldn't work on a bigger sensor. I couldn't use this on a full frame sensor, but it's not actually a 10mm or an 18mm because it has a 1.5 crop factor. So the 10 turns into a 15 and the 18 turns into a 27. So it's actually a 10 by 27 zoom if we think of it as in the 35mm format. So you need to know your crop factor of your camera. It's not a big deal. Once you've got your camera, you're going to know your crop factor, and you're going to do a list of searches that include, the size of the sensor, the focal length that you want with regards to your particular sensor size. Okay, moving on to specialty lenses. There's a number of specialty lenses that you can get out there that are going to do specific jobs. Things like teleconverters. So this one is a 2x converter from Canon, and all this does would attach to one of these super telephotos, the 300 or the 400, and it turns it, if we put it on the 400, it turns it into an 800. If we put it in on the 300, it turns it onto a 600. Now it comes at a cost. You've got more glass that now the same information is traveling through, so there is a slight degradation in quality. You can get a 1.4 times extender, which is better quality, and I tend not to use this unless I absolutely have to. You just use it. You use it sparingly. It's much better to use it without, although sometimes it's hard to tell. So that would be a teleconverter. You can get those for just about any lens. And you've got things like the fisheye, which is, as it says, the fisheye, I think we talked about it a bit earlier. It makes everything like a bulb effect, like you're in a bowl. I'll put an example up for you. That would be a specialty lens. You're not going to use that on something like architecture or something unless you were doing it for artistic effect. It's a 15mm, but it is a fisheye. You can get the same focal length that's not a fisheye with very straight edges. Then we've got things like this, a 24mm lens. Well, you think, why is that particularly impressive? It's a 2.8, not very impressive again. This has a very specific use for me. It's a Canon 24mm. Now, normally on the wider end of things, lenses tend not to have image stabilization. This is the exception. This has image stabilization, even though it's a wide angle lens, and it's not particularly fast. It is 2.8, but guess what? It's really small and light. So if I was putting this on a gimbal, compared to this, which has a 24 in it, this is a 24 to 105, I'm literally saving a quarter the weight by having this lens on it. So this would be a specialty lens, although it's nothing outstanding. You would look at it and think, it's 24, and it's not a very fast 24, but it is super light. So we fly this on drones. We use it for a Movi M5, for a gimbal, so that we can keep the weight of the camera down. It has autofocus and image stabilization. So specialty lens, even though on the face of it, it doesn't appear to be one. Then there's things like this. This is called a Metabones adapter, and you can see on there it's an EF to E, I believe, EF to E mount. And this basically turns a Canon lens into a Sony lens, and I use these all the time. I can use my full frame Canon lenses on my Sony cameras, and they work great. I wouldn't say the autofocus is as good, but you can definitely use them, and I do use them. Is it a lens? Probably not really, because there's no actual glass in there. You can get some that do have a glass in there, but I picked it for that reason, because there's absolutely no loss of quality. But it has some high-tech technology in there that will let the camera speak to the lens, so that it will show aperture and do autofocus and things like that. It even has a USB where you can update the firmware as new lenses come out. Then this can work for you. A great investment if you have several different camera platforms, or you still want to use your old lenses. There's pretty much a mount for most of them. Now, this doesn't work for every lens manufacturer because of the distance from the sensor to the lens. You can't, for example, put a Sony E-mount lens onto a Canon body because of the distance from the back element to the sensor. If you look, see how much deeper the sensor is on the Canon to the Sony. It's a lot further back, so therefore the Sony lenses would be too far away from the sensor to convert, but you can do it the other way around. So you just got to find out which lenses or which mount systems can be converted to which mount systems. But it's a handy tool to have, because you haven't got to discard old lenses, you can still use them again. So then we got things like extension tubes. Now this, I talked a little bit about it before. This will fit on any different lens as long as it's the right mount. This is a Canon one. This is a Canon extension tube EF25, and basically what it does, it just reduces the focal distance of the lens, so you can focus a lot closer, and it's just doing what we were talking about before. It's just moving the lens further away from the sensor, bringing the focal distance a lot closer. So you would use that for macro photography specifically. That's what that's for. A very cheap alternative to a very expensive lens, and in my opinion just as good. You can't really use autofocus on a macro lens because it's so touchy, so you don't really get autofocus with extension tubes, but you don't need it either. When you're that far away from something, you're usually on a tripod, so I would recommend one of these over a macro lens, even though I own a macro lens. There's also lenses that will actually attach to the front element of lenses. Now they're more for the consumer type of cameras, and I'll not necessarily recommend them. I've never seen great results from them. They're very cheap, and they will turn one lens, a normal lens, into a wide lens, but quality is not great, and you're going to get what you pay for. There's lenses made by companies like Lensbaby that literally, just as the same as the extension tube is on this camera, they have flexible like bellows that you can actually twist the lens around while it's mounted onto the camera, and make some really interesting effects. That was the first lens that they came out with, was one that could be twisted. Now if you look up Lensbaby, they have a whole range of specialty lenses that will do different things and give different looks to your pictures. So there's other companies, smaller companies like those, that do specialty lenses. There's also things called tilt shift lenses, which it's probably too much to go into right now, but basically they just bring vertical lines into parallel. If you're standing taking pictures at an angle looking up at a building or something, you can actually adjust the vertical lines so that you're perceived to be taking the picture straight on. But that's a whole nother subject. If you're interested in something like that, I would definitely do a search for tilt shift lenses. Okay, now you've got all this information, what are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to be figuring out what sort of lenses you want to get. You want to definitely consider a normal lens, like I was saying, or a regular zoom lens. Maybe taking that kit lens off if your budget so permits. I would definitely recommend something along the lines of a 24-105 or a 24-70. Be the #1 lens I use in my bag. Has been for 20 years. So anything in that range, 24-70, 24-105. And I own both of those lenses in Canon. One because it has image stabilization, it's an f4, and then the 24-70 is a 2.8, so it's a bit of a faster lens. So I would definitely recommend that. Now you could go with a super zoom if your budget only allows for one lens, but just remember you're not really going to be doing much nighttime photography. You can do it, but it's not going to be great. But if you were going to add to this, then I would probably get a prime next, maybe something where you can get a really shallow depth of field and good bokeh, maybe a 35mm or an 85mm, something like that. And then if I could only have 3 lenses in my bag, my third would be this, the 70-200. You can see how worn up and beaten up this is. It's been in my bag for probably 20 years, so it's probably getting near its expiration date. But if you could have a 70-200, a 24-105 or a 24-70, and a prime that you can get great bokeh with, you've got pretty much your bases covered, and then everything after that is going to be gravy. So I hope this helps. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this series. We're definitely going to be doing some more. It's going to be some different content, but please help support the channel. It's been fun. If you've got any questions, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Thanks very much.